Greetings and welcome back, fellow audio enthusiasts. It is I, Jason, your host of Two-Channel Listening. It's going to be an interesting one today. I am going to have a long walk down Real Talk Lane with you today as I cover off on the Arylic H50 Wireless Multi-Room Network Amplifier, or said simplistically another way, just add speakers and speaker wires type integrated amplifier. Alright, as you can see here, I have three Arylic products. The first is my older demo unit that's going on, I believe, 2 years now. When I first was introduced to Arylic, the little digital network preamplifier that was about $220 when it came out, and it's still going strong. I rely on it every now and then as a backup in a secondary system or when I'm between network players in my main listening room. Haven't gotten rid of it. It's been reliable and I will continue to use it as needed. And you know, that brought up this whole newest generation from Arylic. It appears that Arylic is wanting to slightly, incrementally start moving up market from its $150 to $200 products that everybody loves and uses so often. I've had these BK651 speakers since May of this year, going on 6 months basically of them being in my secondary system. Have not done a review on them and am waiting to do a review on them. But really, after 3 months of use of having the H50, it's time to talk about the H50 and all that it is, all that it does. So let's get into it, shall we? What you have here is a pretty impressive all-in-one little integrated amplifier that you can get direct or through Amazon or through other means. I purchased mine directly from the Arylic websites using the 15% discount code that seems to never go away. And when talking about the price point of this product, I must say that I was aware of the launch date of it, and having been bombarded, that's a good word, having been bombarded every single week, every single Friday through weekends of new discount codes available, at no time have I seen that a 15 to 20% discount code has not been available. Therefore, at list price of $399, I purchased this for $340, and as of this weekend, the 1st of November, there's a 20% discount available to purchase the Arylic products. So it's kind of hard to call this a $400 integrated amplifier if at pretty much since its inception, you can buy it for less than $350. So let's call it a $350 integrated amplifier, shall we? Let's move on. The fit and finish. I will say it is definitely a step up from the $200 unit here, the little silver digital preamp network player. It is a nice thin machine black aluminum faceplate. It does have a larger screen than the older preamp over here, albeit while the screen is larger and it does have larger text, it does not give you any data points. It does not tell you what you're listening to. It does not tell you album. There's no album art. The little $200 digital preamp here does give you actual real-time artist and song playback information. Kind of odd. The only thing that the faceplate's really good for, or the digital readout's good for, is telling you which input you're using, be it AirPlay or the phono or line in, Bluetooth, network, etc. Or occasionally as you're changing the volume, it'll briefly display what volume setting that you're at, but it defaults back to the main input that you are using. So the toggle switch is I would say it actually has a nice input, so you can clearly hear it on off. You basically keep it on and you use the remote to turn it on and off or in standby mode. The volume does have a nice tactile feel to it. It does have it is knurled, or it does have these little machined grooves to it so that you can have a tactile feel to it. You get feedback. It does have little indentations, and it's also your toggle. You can push it in for using the menu to go through different inputs, or to use the balanced to change treble and bass, etc. Around back, you have tons of inputs for this $350 integrated amplifier. It's rather impressive. You've got your Bluetooth antenna, you've got your Wi-Fi antenna, you have digital coax in, you have ARC in, you have USB in, your Ethernet cable, line input, and very shockingly, though you will never see me use it on this channel because I do not like messing with vinyl, it does have a phono stage input. There is other reviewers who have gone over what that phono stage is, what it's like using it, and to set realistic expectations that this is a $350 integrated amplifier. Let's just leave it at that. Okay. Another interesting point. It has a DC input, so it does come with its own 24-volt power supply. There is an optional 32-volt power supply that you can connect with this, although it's not on the Arylic's website. You cannot purchase it through Arylic. You would actually have to get it through Amazon, and you could use the Fosse 32-volt 5-amp power supply if you wanted to boost the power output of this, which we'll talk in a brief second. I do want to say about these itty bitty tiny little speaker terminals. Use the banana connectors. These are quite useless. I have to say that I did try to use my Zoo Audio spade connectors with this. They're too close together. My finger, I don't even have big hands, and it's very difficult to tighten these down. And as you saw, the plastic caps come off, so it's even harder to actually get a really good grip and make sure that those spades are on there tightly. Just skip it. Use only banana connectors with an amplifier like this with that type of a connection. And last but not least, there is an ohm switch. You can switch from 8 ohms to 4 ohms. I'll talk about that later as well. Wrapping up connectivity and fit and finish, I will say that it meets expectations for what it is, but it does have a very thin chassis. The top plate is very thin. How do I fix that ringing? Well, you know, I've got my cheap little Amazon 1.5 pound door stoppers. Solved. Taken care of. In the description link below. All right. Let's talk about the real gripe number one. Again, Arylic has been looking to move upstream as it introduced these $700 BK651 bookshelf speakers. Did I say that right? $699, yep. Versus all of the under $250 products it had prior. Generally with those products, packaging was as you would expect with a $200 or less product. Stepping up to a listed $400, one would expect the packaging to match and be as well protected. While I will say that the box is a big improvement over its other lesser products. I was very disappointed and let my two Arylic reps know how disappointed I was when this arrived in a plastic bag. In a plastic bag. It may not come through, you may not see that, but yes, this arrived in a plastic bag at my doorstep, had no seal on it. Right. So it came with no seal on it in its plastic bag, meaning that the boxes could separate at any given time, and the box took quite a beating getting to me. While it's a nice colorful box, it's quite damaged, and they took quite a bit of a risk with a $400 integrated amp with no protective packaging around it through mail. Quite interesting that I could buy a $6 candle from Amazon that would arrive with far more protective packaging at probably a $12 loss to Amazon for buying a $6 candle. That just is what it is, folks. And I've let Arylic know that they need to improve the delivery experience. All right, past that. Let's talk power, shall we? Yes, let's. 8 ohms. I know the website talks about 50 watts per channel. 50 watts per channel. The box talks about 50 watts per channel. Everything's 50 watts per channel. Yeah, 4 ohms. At 8 ohms, this is good for 30 watts. At 4 ohms, using the switch and it has a boost, it's basically good for 50 watts. Or, I say it again, you can't buy the 32 volt power supply. You have to outsource that someplace else for $30, which I plan to buy to see what that does, because it's supposed to boost the 4 ohm output to 80 watts. They won't tell you what it does at 8 ohms. So I'm guessing that it's probably going to be in the 40 to 50 watt range at 8 ohms. Now, let's talk about some reality. Let's talk about how I am going to judge this $350 integrated amplifier. I've been doing this for a while now. This channel is now 3 years old, surprisingly. And I will say that I have had several hundred products come through my hands. I've personally owned several hundred hi-fi components, and therefore the lens with which I judge these products is I look for a specific use case to me. How would I want to use this product? Which environment do I want to use this product? And that is pretty much how I judge it. I am not you. I do not have your budget. I do not have your room. I do not have your use case. I don't know your use case. You may have vinyl. You may want to use that. You may use Spotify. You may want to use that. I am telling you how it works for me in my environment, with my use case, with the music that I like, at the playback levels that I like to listen to, which in my dedicated listening room is anywhere between 70 and 85 dB. Now, that's not why I bought this. For a while, I have been using various desktop amplifiers in my bedroom as I work from home. I'm a broker for the music room, and I have a desktop system / bedroom system. I like using those for background music, or when I'm doing research, or when I'm looking for new music. And as a secondary system, its primary focus is not music. The primary focus is whether I'm working, researching, sleeping, or relaxing, and therefore there's no such thing as critical listening in that environment. I've been using an NAD 3045 digital desktop. I've been using a Fosse D blah 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 something something that I paid $120 for. Okay, with those two products, both of them use Bluetooth, both of them I do streaming from my tablet or my iPhone, and I was looking for a step up in the performance, and I was curious how well this $350 integrated amplifier would go up against the $900 NAD D3045. Okay, so that's kind of the use case. That's how I am approaching this. I have the $120 Fosse, the $350 H50, and the $900, $899 D3045. Okay, in that particular instance, there are varying degrees of good enough, satisfying, and musical enjoyment. And I use those three specific words, adverbs, whichever you want to call them now, as a secondary system in my bedroom/office. I'm looking for something that's going to give me that musical enjoyment, that is going to be satisfying, and is going to be good enough for that environment for my purposes. Okay. Now, with the $700 BK651s, and 50% of the time I was using my less efficient, harder to drive, ruthlessly iron-fisted Ryan R610 bookshelf speakers that retail for $2,000. And I have to say, I really enjoy that combination with the H50. Just off the bat, most of the time I'm listening with the Ryan speakers connected to the H50 in that secondary system. There's a good synergy there. This has adequate power in that environment to where even at distances of 10 feet away, I've been able to manage up to the mid 80 decibel level with this quote-unquote 30 watt into 8 ohm amplifier. Pretty good decibel levels in a secondary system that are, again, admirable and enjoyable and good enough. Okay. What happens when good enough meets a critical listening environment? What happens when a $350 all-in-one integrated amplifier meets a $6,000 speaker, or is up against what is now, hard to believe this, a $15,000 front end that I have in this room? A good reality check. A good reality check for this reviewer, for this hobbyist, for this music enjoyer, for my evening listening sessions. When I unplug all of this and connect my Cardis reference speaker cables to this 30 watt amplifier, the first thing I notice on the first song, at just below 70 dB, I think to myself, wow, these Opera Cali speakers that I've had for 6 months now, it is doing an admirable job of driving those 3.6 ohm speakers. They're not easy to drive. I've had tube amplifier that did not like them and gave up one of the channels using those very speakers. So they're not the easiest speakers to drive. But those Italian beauties, they sound really good with a $350 amplifier. And I think to myself, this is an admirable performance for $350. Be it never in a million years would I even have those type of speaker cables connected to such an amplifier. But I was giving the little H50 its due. I was giving the little H50 everything I possibly could to give it a chance against this crazy front end that I have behind me. The Modrite LS100, my first watt J2, and my Inuo streamer connected to a demo unit. I didn't purchase it. A demo unit I have on loan from the music room. A Soul Note D1N, a $7,000 DAC. It's an incredible DAC. It's not exactly something I'm going to review for two-channel listening because those aren't the kind of products that I've been reviewing here. Nevertheless, without my cabling, this is an incredibly expensive front end that I have in the entirety of me doing this hobby. So with that background and with my system sounding the finest it's ever sounded to this point, what a great juxtaposition to listen to this H50. When I turn on the second song, and I actually go to something that I listen to regularly, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Tin Pan Alley, and I want to crank it up, get my decibel meter out. I want to make sure I'm getting 75 dB, maybe even close to 80 dB peaks with the Opera Calais. Yes, this little amplifier can do that. Those speakers aren't totally inefficient, and this little amplifier is able to push up to 85 dB in this room. However, it becomes crystal clear, and I use crystal loosely, that for $350, the obvious advantages in a secondary system in a non-critical listening session has very hard limitations. Immediately, I hear less focus, there's less bass, the soundstage is not as deep, the soundstage is not as wide, the soundstage is not as tall, there's more grain, and things are starting to sharpen up and get a little harder through my Opera Calais. That's just the second song, mind you. This third song, I try and I crank it up a little bit more to 80 dB, and it becomes completely apparent that in this environment, with these kinds of speakers, with this kind of front end, that the $350 is no realistic match. Are we surprised? No, we're not surprised. I'm not surprised. While at super low listening levels, it is a satisfying listen, which is why it works in a secondary system for me. For those of you who are on extreme budgets and you're trying to break away from your headphones, you're trying to break away from your Bluetooth speaker, you're trying to break away from relying on a Bose soundbar, can you buy something like this and add $300, $400, $500 bookshelf speakers to it and really elevate your listening experience? Abso-friggin-lutely you can. And for those of you out there who are looking to make that jump, as I described, away from those type of products I described, yes, you can elevate your listening experience. You can derive more musical enjoyment, and you can get that good enough for the budget you have at that moment in time. You see, there was another critical issue that I ran into, which I explained to my two Arylic reps. Other people have complained about this as well. As a desktop unit, it starts at volume level 3. Not level 1, not level 2, but 3. We shall pull the pin of the holy hand grenade and throw it on the count of 3. I do not understand this. Even if I switched the 8 ohms to the 4 ohm switch, even though I put in my least efficient speakers in my secondary system, as a desktop amplifier, I could not use it for casual background music while working, while needing to take phone calls, which is one of the main purposes of having a desktop system, is to have very light background music. My $120 Fosse has no problems dialing that volume all the way down to 1 to where it's just an absolute whisper in the background with any of the 3 speakers. With the H50 on hand, it's pretty much between 58 and 61 dB as a desktop or near field system. That's too loud. That's distracting. When I'm trying to take phone calls, I would have to hit pause, mute, or off every single time. And with the incoming calls that I take, that's just not feasible. So only during complete casual listening or when I'm not going to take phone calls could I use this desktop amplifier in that type of an environment. Again, I don't know what they need to do to tweak the volume control, but in that instance, that's a pretty big fail for a desktop amplifier, that you can't get it low enough for that type of use. Does that make it so that you never want to buy it, or is that a game changer, or is that some reason that would stop you? I don't know. I've happily been using it for 90 days, but that's one for instance that I cannot use it. I would have to rely on either the NAD 3045 or that Fosse for that specific use case. Now, the Fosse's 25 watts. I can say that this is far more powerful. I've tapped the Fosse out on several speakers in this room, and with the matching BK651s, I've been able to use the Fosse at max volume and have no more, whereas I've never quite gotten to 100 on the Arylic, be it that it is too loud for me at that point, and it's not as sharp as or I should say it's not as clear as I would like it to be. It does have a decent 93 dB signal to noise ratio, which is better than some older products. It's actually quite admirable signal to noise ratio for a product of this expense, but nevertheless, I just want to put that out there that it has enough power to drive you out of your seat in a desktop environment, and again, like I said, at 10 feet away it could reach 85 dB. Against the NAD, which is a 60 watt amplifier, 50 watts, sorry, I might be off by 10 watts. It's 50 or 60 watts at 8 ohms. The NAD is barely clearer. The NAD is barely cleaner. And I could only tell those differences when I would plug the NAD into, again, the main system here, and I would listen to it critically. Only then could I start to hear some of those same attributes for a $900 integrated amplifier, be it streaming, Bluetooth, etc. Whereas once I start to get up past 80 dB, that the amp section is just not as tight as I need it to be, doesn't have the woofer control that I want it to have, and it is not as crystalline clear with the highs as I would expect it, or I should say not expect it, that I would want it to be in a critical listening environment. As a desktop amplifier, it acquits itself well, but I will say at half the price of the NAD, this actually is the better unit because it has far more flexibility, and the fact that its Wi-Fi is more usable and it has Tidal Connect. That's a win for the H50 all day over the NAD. That's where it leads me to where, my no bullcrap meter, basically, there's a time, a place, and a budget for these kinds of products. I know there are other reviewers where they spend all their time in the $1,000 or less category, and they say, wow, every single freaking time to every single freaking $300 or $400 or $500 product. This is a game changer. This is a this. This is a that. This channel's different. This channel has an extreme mix of different products at different price points. I'm generally in the $2,500 range with a lot of my products. Lately, I've been deviating from that. Obviously, I've had the Calais for 6 months, and they are not cheap. They are wonderful. I love them. That's why they've been here for 6 months. But there's always other use cases. There's always other environments, and I thought it pertinent to share my experience from a critical listening perspective to a secondary perspective. While in this room, I hate to say what the total cost of this entire system is, and I won't. I have a perfectly good use case in the other room for a $1,000 budget system, and I'm happy. I'm happy with it. It does what I want it to do, save for that low listening level. And before I go, this is another critical piece. I talked about the packaging. I talked about the fit and finish. I talked about how I constantly send emails in. I give kudos where kudos belongs, and I will say good things about the product, again, as I did in a secondary environment, why I like it. But I also took the hood off, and I wanted to show you something that maybe is an expectation for a $350 product from China. Now, a lot of folks don't take the hoods off of the pieces that they own. I do. Interestingly, when I took the hood off of this here unit, I noted my eye caught something right away. The transistor was missing a nut. There's only two transistors, a left and a right, and one of them was missing a nut. And I go, wow, that's interesting. I know that it has silicone on it, and I know that it's affixed and stuck to the heatsink. There should be no issue with it because at the bottom leads, those are obviously soldered to the board as well. So there's no reason for it to go anywhere, even under, heat soak. However, if it wasn't for that missing nut, I wouldn't have paid closer attention to those transistors. Here you go. The left and the right transistors are different. I sent that to my Arylic reps, and so far it's been completely crickets on what's going on with two different transistors in this $350 product. Now you can clearly see you've got Qualcomm there, you've got Texas Instruments, and you've got that nice Sabre chip, the 9023, which is a pretty impressive step up for a product at this price point. But two different non-matching transistors for left and right channel. I'm being honest, I didn't know that until I started taking pictures of this unit a week ago. So for nearly 3 months, I had been playing it, not knowing that, and I cannot tell you that there's any left to right channel difference. I cannot tell you that one channel is off, more distortion, or any of that, so I'm not telling you that. I did not perceive that under any loads, under the 3 or 4 different speakers that I've used. I'm just sharing with you that from a quality control standpoint and paying for what you get, there you go. It will not even match the performance of the NAD. Do I prefer the functionality? Yes, but even at the end of the day, the NAD is a cleaner playing amplifier. That's what I have for you. That's the reality. That's the real talk. There is no wow. There is no game changer. There is no the best of, the best for, the best. Reality is, for $350, this is what you can expect from this product. Nothing more, nothing less. If you set your expectations realistically, you're not going to be disappointed. And I was not disappointed with the H50. I plan to keep the H50. I plan to use the H50 for as long as I can, for as long as it will allow me to torture test it and beat the living piss out of it with my Ryan R610 speakers. Until next time, that's all I got. Thank you for tuning in. Cheers.